What does immersion mean to you? Because when I say immersion, I think everyone gets the idea, but if I dig a little deeper, it seems we all have a different definition for it in our TTRPG games. For some, it means being wholeheartedly in character, or forgetting entirely about base reality, experiencing real stress, fear, and joy from stakes that themselves are purely fictional. Others say the magic is in the description or in playing music during a game. I even heard some say that when they play a TTRPG game, they can actually picture the environment in their mind. They imagine the faces of NPCs, see the attacks play out as they happen. They can visualize everything as if they could almost touch it. And when I'm a game master, I want to be able to curate that kind of experience for my players. I want them to feel so perfectly immersed in the story that everything else just melts away. And then I thought about Stranger Things, and it completely changed how I think about immersion in a TTRPG game, which I can only describe as longing for a world you've never actually known.
Oh, we're not home anymore, are we?
No. I think maybe I got immersed a little bit too hard.
So immersed you landed us in the upside down?
Yeah. Well, you know, now that we're stuck here, might as well try to reverse engineer it and see how we got here. Turns out there are different types of immersion. There's even been some attempts at categorizing them. I stumbled upon a table by Matthias suggesting 4 different types of immersion in video gaming, but they also apply to TTRPG. There is systems immersion, where the processes and mechanics of a game flow so well without friction that the meta stops being a source of distraction, which is probably why sometimes we're advised to make a ruling on the spot as opposed to breaking the flow of the game to go look up a rule. There's spatial immersion, which relates to the sensory experience of being physically in that other environment. Things like ambience, sounds, lighting, even smells can impact that feeling. Then narrative or sequential immersion is the pull that comes from I need to know what happens next. And finally, there's empathic or social immersion, the goal of which is to build emotional involvement and connection to that world and what's in it. And of course, these types overlap and feed into each other constantly.
Alright, so which one got us trapped here?
Actually, in our case, I think there might be something else at play here.
Another force!
These categories are a great framework. They're delivery mechanisms. They explain the scaffolding or what channels immersion flows through. And by doing so, they give us actionable levers to pull. If I want to increase the sensory immersion of my players, I can play around with lighting and ambient sounds, but they point us to the tools, not so much the sensation. And depending on how we use these tools, they can create completely different flavors of immersion. Say, if those categories are the shape of the immersion, what is its color? How does that immersion manifest? I was a bit surprised by how my own sense of immersion manifested in Stranger Things. I don't easily get immersed into TV, movies, or books. I actually naturally distance myself a lot from what I'm watching. I'm one of those heartless monsters who didn't cry at that scene from The Lion King. Fear me.
You sometimes cry when you listen to music, though.
Music is different. It speaks to my soul. But with Stranger Things, that distance was gone. And most importantly, it was a very particular color of immersion, which I can only describe as longing for a world you've never actually known. I fell into the world of Hawkins so deep that it was hard prying myself out of it. The setting seemed familiar in a way I grew very attached to. And when the season ends, I was longing to get back. Like there was an itch in my brain that only Stranger Things could scratch, which I had felt before in TTRPG. It's actually the symptom that I consider a pretty big sign that I'm getting immersed and sucked into a campaign. When the game ends and there's this lingering pull of I can't wait to be part of that world again. And yeah, my therapist has a field day with my pull. But questions about my weird psyche aside, this is an experience I want to curate for my players, to make them miss a world that never actually existed. It's a volatile and slippery color of immersion to capture, but I think not an impossible one. So looking at Stranger Things as a case study, how can a game master generate that same flavor of immersion and emotional pull for their campaign?
Light bright, turn on the magic of colored lights.
Are you serious right now?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the magic of Light Bright. The magic of a setting isn't in its big, spectacular elements, it's in the details. In Stranger Things, mundane objects are filled with magic. Fairy lights or toys like the Light Bright are channels of communication between Hawkins and the Upside Down. Popular music played into a Walkman becomes a shield against monsters. The Dungeons & Dragons books are treated like prophetic texts that the kids keep consulting to try and make sense of the supernatural. They give the otherworldly names from their games. Demogorgon, Mind Flayer, Vecna. These little details are not showstoppers, they're the small things that make world building endearing. They highlight the differences between that world and ours and are irresistibly immersive. Because in that world, when we interact with the ordinary, it's special and magical. The mundane suddenly carries weight, meaning, wonder. And isn't that aspect what we actually long for?
Light bright, turn on the magic of shining light.
Light Bright from Milton Bradley.
So in our TTRPG games, how can we infuse wonder into the little things? The first level is making magic show up in less flashy, more intimate ways. Magic items don't have to be adventure-coded objects like weapons, staffs, and scrolls. A little bit of magic can be held in rolling pins, sewing needles, or children's toys. You don't even necessarily need to make objects literally magical for their meaningfulness to carry magic. Legends and customs bring their own sense of whimsy. Maybe the inhabitants of a town always check the tea leaves left inside a cup because they believe that the drinker's true nature is revealed in the patterns. Ordinary things can also carry symbolic meaning. Perhaps people tie red ribbons, a symbol of resistance, to lampposts in the night as an act of defiance. Or secret messages can be hidden in the way that clothing is arranged on a laundry drying rack. Like a blue towel on the left side would point in the direction of the safe house. The magic of everyday things can also be in its emotional meaning. How the smell of baked goods open flashback scenes where a player describes their character's memories associated to it. Magic doesn't come from spectacle, but from meaning. It's in the small things that the world has chosen to consider significant. And maybe it's those small things that give the players something to hold on to and to remember your world by outside a session when they do their own laundry and think about the next time they'll get to dive into this other world full of whimsy.
Has this ever happened to you? Your in-laws are coming over in an hour and they're going to expect the house to be spotless. And once again, a gelatinous cube breaks into your living room, shedding corrosive goo all over the rug you just had steam cleaned. We've all been there.
Nope, never had a gelatinous cube trash my place. Can't relate. But the panic and overwhelm? Yeah, I've had my encounters with it on a daily basis. Anyways, in a TTRPG, if you want your players to connect with a world that's unfamiliar to them, you're gonna have to build a bridge. So how do we build a bridge? I didn't grow up in the 80s or in America for that matter. I don't have any meaningful attachment to rotary phones, leg warmers, Rubik's Cubes, or scrunchies. With all those references to pop culture and 80s nostalgia, I would expect that the show caters to a particular audience. And yet, it seems that the great majority of viewers are millennials. Because Stranger Things isn't really set in the 80s, it's a bunch of universally human narratives playing dress up with neon leggings and shoulder pads. That's the trick for any work of fiction that makes unfamiliar worlds familiar. It taps into universal experiences we can all recognize. Ghibli movies or The Last Airbender are prime examples. But on top of that, Stranger Things is packed with cliches, and that's a good thing.
You are a cliche, you do realize that.
You are a cliche.
Actually, everyone is a cliche, Steve Harrington. Hawkins is populated by caricatures. The high school popularity contest, the bully's recycled insults, the bored housewife, or my personal favorite, that one classic line, "This is Hawkins, nothing ever happens in Hawkins." Tropes sometimes get a bad rap in movies and books as overused cliché, but in TTRPG they are insanely valuable tools. Tropes are the language of the gaming table. We don't have the luxury that cinema or literature has in visuals showing exactly what we mean or long descriptions, so tropes communicate complex information to our players in just a few words, without breaking the flow of pacing. It taps into a shared database of storytelling patterns and motifs that we all know. Tropes are fundamentally bridges. It might not be surprising that Kids on Bikes, a TTRPG inspired by Stranger Things, decided to use tropes as the starting point for player character options. The character options are things like the funny sidekick, the loner weirdo, the overprotective parent, or the wannabe. When you communicate with your players using them, you establish familiarity. They make the world feel accessible and recognizable. And when you layer those tropes with universal human emotions, guilt, loneliness, coming of age, first crushes, you make the tropes resonate with the players. So in your TTRPG game, what tropes can you use to establish familiarity? It'll be a whole lot easier for your players to make the jump from the real world to this one. So great, you've created a bridge for your players, but where does that bridge lead? What does that world even look like? When researching that idea of longing for another world, I found a whole bunch of words. Nostalgia, anemoia, agioptasia, Shuraev, escapism, sodal, fernwe. Some of these words are about missing a world we once knew, or even remembering it as better than it was. Others speak more of wanderlust. But regardless of what that world is, or whether we've actually experienced it before, when we try to picture it, it's not the events that come to mind. It's something a lot more elusive. An atmosphere, a mood, some intangible feeling that's hard to actually pin down. It's abstract and slippery, but it doesn't come out of nowhere. It's emerging from a combination of symbols, objects, colors, textures. But if you approach world building a certain way, maybe you can orchestrate that atmosphere instead of just hoping it happens somehow by accident. I used to teach applied arts for high school, which kind of equates to design, and it had me think, what happens if we use the same practices as interior designers or graphic designers, but for world building? One of our classes was called Démarche Créative, the methodology of the creative process. It often implies creating a body of references, mood boards, a set of elements, textures, a palette that guides the project's visual identity. Now I often start planning for a TTRPG adventure the same way, before I even get into writing the plot. I gather up a little body of aesthetic elements that will make up the vibe of an adventure. These repeated elements become cues that players start associating with your world, and eventually form connections to. Walkie-talkies, cassette tapes, and shady government people are a constant in Stranger Things, but the show also seems to have a different body of references for each season. Season 3 is a classic 80s suburban summer with something horrible hiding and lurking just below the mall, the pop music, the ice cream, and the swimming pool. It's giving stranger danger, missing kids' photos on milk cartons. Meanwhile, Season 4 felt very gothic horror to me, with the Creel house coded like a haunted manor, a literal satanic panic witch hunt, or visits to the Penhurst mental hospital, and music that gets more orchestral. So maybe give a try to approaching your world building like a designer, and create some kind of mood board or list of elements. If you try it, here's a few prompts I like to consider.
What's the dominant colors and textures?
Warm fireplace and aged wood are a very different vibe from Industrial Revolution steel and black smoke.
What are some key locations and do they have particular architecture? What patterns tend to show up?
Maybe it's street painters on every cobblestone street and extravagant 19th century hats with feathers.
What themes are important?
Tradition versus progress maybe, or the struggle against oppression and surveillance. Once you've created this list or board, keep coming back to it. What makes a world feel tangible is how those aesthetic elements come together to give a place and time its distinct and reliable identity. And these motifs also are the cues that help players transition back into the world. And I think now is the time to wrap this up and try to find our way home. So on this note, have a good evening, and may you always find your path navigating those dreamscapes of your own making.